But I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome everybody to our Carbon Leadership Forum Wisconsin presentation today. We're, I think, very lucky to have Steelcase willing to share a conversation about materials transparency, particularly a closer look into EPDs, but we'll talk about some other transparency documents as well. My name is Kim Radine. I'm an architect and a sustainability specialist, and this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. I've had a lot of questions over the years looking at these documents about what this must look like from the manufacturer's side. So happy to have Tammy and Mike here to share that with us today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. I'm unfortunately going to have to read bios because they are wonderful and detailed, and I can't keep this all in my head. But we have today from Steelcase, we have Tammy Ayers with us. She's manager, marketing strategy, and stakeholder engagement as part of the global sustainability team at Steelcase Inc. In her role, Tammy is part of a cross-company effort to ensure the company achieves its global sustainability goals. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in business leadership from Davenport University, a certification for lean manufacturing from the University of Michigan College of Engineering, an Essentials of Green Chemistry from UC Berkeley, and is a certified performance technologist issued by the International Society of Performance Improvement. She served on the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council Advisory Board, the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment Board, was the executive co-chair of the Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute Stakeholder Advisory Committee, a committee member of the Sustainable Chemistry Alliance Coalition, and a partner with Beyond Benign. So Tammy is just a little bit qualified to talk about this stuff with us today. And with Tammy, we also have Mike Felling, client business manager at Steelcase Inc. In the Wisconsin and Northern Illinois region. In his role, Mike works with corporate, education, and healthcare clients to help identify business issues and apply space solutions that help support organizational ambitions. Mike also works with local A&D, real estate, and general contractor communities to keep all stakeholders in the market informed on new Steelcase sustainability efforts, products, solutions, and research trends and insights. Mike is based in Madison, Wisconsin, and has a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Communications from the University of Wisconsin-Madison and an MBA from Marquette University. So thank you to Tammy and Mike for joining us today. Thank you for being willing to share Steelcase's journey with us. And I just want to invite everyone who's joining us today to go ahead and type questions in the chat. We're going to try to hold questions for a Q&A period at the end, but as they come up, feel free to type them in and we will try to address questions as we can at the end. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing and let Tammy take the screen over.
And let me know when you can see my screen.
I see your screen.
Okay, great.
You can see. Kim, I'll start. Thank you to the entire CLF for the opportunity to present with you to the whole community today. We appreciate it. I figured I would just do kind of a quick background on who Steelcase is. We don't want to make any assumptions and think everybody knows who we are. So Steelcase, we're a commercial furniture manufacturer. We manufacture furniture and architectural goods for healthcare, education, and corporate verticals.
Did anyone else just lose Mike?
Sounded like it. I wasn't sure if he was done or.
Nope, sorry about that.
Are you back?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, going in and out here. We're headquartered in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Over 12,000 employees. We're a global presence. We go through dealerships. So we have over 700 dealers globally. If you think about commercial furniture market, We are the largest commercial furniture manufacturer globally. And I just want to say the company started in 1912, and our founders created 7 core values when they started the company. And one of those in 1912 was protect the environment. So I just want to bring that up and say sustainability is not something we've recently focused on. It has been in Steelcase DNA since the company started. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tammy.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks everybody for taking time out of what I'm sure are very busy schedules to let us share kind of what we're doing and maybe answer some questions that may be commonly running through your mind from time to time. But before we get started in sharing what Steelcase is doing and kind of behind the scenes, we thought it might be fun to actually play a little game to get your brain juices flowing. And so I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute and go to a different screen. And I think if I share my screen then. Okay, here we go. Everyone see my screen? It's got a deer on it.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yep, we can see now, Tammy.
Hopefully you guys have either a computer or your phone, and you can either scan the code here or you can actually go to Kahoot. So I see people are able to join. So this is great. You want to put in your game PIN number. I'll give you just a minute. So as you're joining, to give you a little bit of background, we're just going to throw out some definitions, and each of you will have an opportunity from whatever device you're using to select the best option. And as we go through these, it'll kind of give us, based on your name and your little icon that was assigned to you, who's kind of responding to these the fastest, and it's a little bit of a competition. So hopefully you have fun with us. So we'll get started. And this actually is based on our customer research of what our customers are asking a lot about. So you'll obviously see some carbon terms in here. All right, get ready. All right, having a balance between emitting carbon and absorbing carbon from the atmosphere, generally via carbon offset projects. Awesome. So carbon footprint would be close, but carbon neutral is actually the offsetting of the actual project itself. So it looks like a lot of you were great. Let's do the next one. So Julia is on top. A list of worst-in-class materials and chemicals known to pose serious risk to human health and the ecosystem. Great. I think there's a tendency to see that red box and click it because you're thinking in your mind red list. And so it's got to be a red box. But yes, the green box with red list in it is the correct answer. And Julia's still on top. Let's take the next one. The first science-based framework for companies to set net zero targets. Awesome. So it was the blue box, SBTI's corporate net zero standard. So that's definitely growing in popularity. All right, we have a new leader, Kim R, with Eden and Mandy not too far behind. Emissions from extraction, refining, processing, transportation, materials fabrication, and end of use. And the answer is embodied carbon. So the red box, great job. And we have a new leader, Tim, with Eden and Kim right behind him. A large global provider of business sustainability ratings based on planet, ethics, and human rights, among others. This one's probably a little tricky, but it is EcoVadis. So if you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to go take a look. It kind of gives a nice scorecard of what aspects a company is pursuing. And they have analysts that review documentation, proof points that back up that a company is doing what they say they're doing. So right now, Steelcase has EcoVadis Gold level. All right, Tim's still in the lead. We've got two new follow-ups, Chelsea and David behind. A document showing transparent and verified information about the life cycle environmental impact of products and services. Right, correct. Environmental Product Declarations, or EPDs. All right, Tim's in the lead by a little bit. So those of you wanting to catch up. A closed loop model where a product is used, recycled, composted, or reused, then goes back into a new life cycle. You're correct. Circularity. And Tim's on fire. All right, two more. Mismanaged plastic waste at risk of ending up in the ocean, located 200 meters from rivers or within 50 kilometers. Correct. Ocean bound. So there is a difference between an ocean plastic and ocean bound in that definition, meaning that it just needs to be within that 200 meters of rivers. It's not actually found in the ocean. Tim is still in the lead with Chelsea right behind him. Last question. The natural world around us, including varieties of different plants, animals, insects, and microorganisms. Great job. Biodiversity. So our third place winner is Chelsea. Second is David. And first, let me guess, Tim. So great job, you guys. I hope this was a little bit of fun to get your brains flowing in order to be able to ask questions on the presentation. So thanks so much for playing.
Nice work, David, Tim, and Chelsea.
We'll want to leave that so you don't have to hear the music. And then I'll share my screen again. All right, we're back into the presentation. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can see it, Tammy.
Okay, perfect. All right, moving on. Okay, so thinking about some of those questions that commonly come up as it pertains to transparency and documentation, I kind of set up this sharing with trying to answer some questions. So as an organization, Steelcase, do we actually set goals? Yes, we do, around both people and planet. But where does that really stem from, or where do we start? So the first thing that we actually do is we complete a materiality assessment. And if you're not familiar with that, it's really looking at the impacts to our business and the impacts to some of our key stakeholders, including customers, different organizations, government, our suppliers, our, lots of different stakeholders. And going under a methodology to really determine all of these different aspects of sustainability or ESG and plotting them based on data that we collect from all of these stakeholders to determine what is most important to our stakeholders and to our business. And in the upper right-hand quadrant, then kind of defines and informs developing your strategy around those key aspects. But that's not the only thing. For our people on planet, we also use a lot of different recognized global standards and reporting frameworks. So since this conversation is really around climate impacts, you can see that there's quite a few that inform our decision-making, our strategies, such as the science-based targets, the CDP, the TCFD. So as these reporting requirements evolve over time, they continue to push the envelope with organizations to be able to share what they're doing. So these are two key ways that help inform our organization on really how we set our goals, what our key goals are, and then we begin with a cross-functional team and stakeholder group to actually define what those goals are. I'm not going to spend time going into the people side of it, but we do have people-based goals as well. But the outcome of our last materiality assessment really generated these 3 key areas of focus. So, and all of these touch on carbon, obviously. So reduce our carbon footprint, design for circularity, and choose and use materials responsibly. So these are kind of the key areas of impact that we're focusing our initiatives under. So delving into that reducing carbon, Steelcase has set a climate commitment, and we feel it's quite ambitious. So a few of the things that we feel demonstrate this is we were the first in our industry to become carbon neutral in 2020 and still are carbon neutral today. We were the first in our industry to set science-based targets to reduce our emissions by 50% by 2030. A little teaser, I suppose, because it is out there publicly, but Steelcase has also set our long-term targets and set a net zero goal. So if you go to the SBTI website, you'll see that information. We were the first to set the most aggressive supplier emission reduction goals. So we are working hard with our supply chain to really have our key suppliers that emit the highest number of emissions to also set science-based targets. And then lastly, we're the first and currently only at this time to offer certified carbon neutral products, which for our customers that are focused on their scope 3 emissions, this is going to help reduce and meet some of their goals. So we know we're a manufacturer, and there are some key ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint. That includes incorporating recycled content, but we do need to be very careful about that because we are very also focused on material ingredients in our products, and not all recycled content is created equally. So we have to be very careful and conscientious about the type of recycled content that we're incorporating, because we don't want to put toxic chemicals back into the product that have already been worked out. Changing materials, obviously, looking for ones with lower embodied carbon or cleaner materials, reducing the weight of parts, selecting suppliers that are nearby, or definitely ones with strategies around lowering their carbon footprint. And then the whole circular economy and building business models and opportunities to reuse both materials and products themselves. So another question, from a manufacturing perspective, what's included in the EPD assessment? I think this is pretty common across, the LCA process. Obviously, there's the material acquisition, production process, and distribution and end of life phases of this. But there's also the piece of it that what's included is really objective, scientifically accepted, credible, independently third-party verified, neutral, because there's predetermined environmental performance levels, difficult. Definitely, if you're not experienced with this type of data, to interpret it as a non-expert can be challenging, and non-comparable, which we'll get into that conversation in a couple of slides, but just being able to relate those numbers to real environmental impacts and then be able to judge those differences. So what are the essential transparency elements we need in order to end with the result of an environmental product declaration? Well, one, obviously third-party verification is key or critical to have a published reviewed document, but also we need to make sure to have a defined functional unit or the model being assessed, and using a common product category rule that defines those impacts. So Steelcase uses the BIFMA, which is our trade organization. We are using their product category rules for all 3 regions in which we do business, which is North America, APAC region, and EMEA. For EMEA, though, there is an additional aspect that is used. I just took a couple of notes here, which is EN 15804A+2. So that is in addition to the BIFMA product category rule. On the back end, from a Steelcase perspective, these key areas are information. So I actually just pulled kind of the key aspects from our bill of material. But what we need is exact material, weight of the material, the supplier, and any additional tiers typically needed for material declarations, the supplier location, and then assessment parameters. So going back to that functional unit, and product packaging, composition, and other factors. So we've done enough life cycle assessments and different measurements within our organization that estimated right now, we know that 66% of products are where our biggest emissions and where we can make the biggest impact in our organization. Transportation is 16% and operations is 18%. So we know, especially as it relates to materials, that is one of our biggest impact areas and where we can find the most value in trying to reduce our carbon. So how do we decide prioritization wise? Well, one, we partner with our product marketing team to determine that priority. And the two examples I give here, one of the questions that we get is, well, why aren't you doing all of the style numbers, not just one or two? And so on the left of your screen is our elective elements product. And one of the reasons I think this exemplifies why we don't do EPDs for every style number is because there's over 400,000 line items of material that has to be assessed as part of the configurable system, such as elective elements or EE. And so if we were to create a EPD for every style number within here, we would be spending so much of our time just focused on this one product that we wouldn't be able to give you the information for many of the other projects or products that you're purchasing as part of a configuration of your building space or a room or whatever it is you're defining. We also, so for Steelcase in particular, we identify the product model to be assessed based on the sales volume because we feel that that meets the greatest customer demand, that we're able to provide that exact information to the greatest number of people. But there are other ways to look at this. You can have a single style number, highest selling, which is the choice that we choose to make. You can have a single style with the worst case impact. But again, that goes back to there's a ton of investment of time to consider all of those possible outcomes. And so you're spending all your time reconfiguring and figuring out what that worst case scenario is before you can even start to go down that path. And then lastly, you can do the multiple style numbers where nothing is excluded. But what we have found, because we've done worst case, we've done projected highest selling sales volume, we see that there isn't a huge significant difference there. So we feel confident that when we're choosing the highest selling runner that we're pretty close. It's not exact, but we're pretty close to being able to provide you a good idea of what that embodied carbon is, what those intended outcomes are. So what are the environmental impacts assessed? These definitely have evolved. And so really this is previously kind of how they were defined: the global warming, the eutrophication, the photochemical smog. And then over time, they've kind of been broken down into global warming, respiratory inorganics, carcinogens, et cetera. So we're constantly trying to stay on the leading edge of what is changing over time and definitions of different aspects of the life cycle assessment process. We do know, while these don't significantly change over time, what does change is the methods to assess the impact. So Tracy, IPCC, and examples such as that. So what does our process really look like? Well, it all begins with data collection. So we first have to define that representative style and configuration. We have to collect the bill of materials, which includes both the product and packaging information. And there's a lot of involvement from our engineering department here. One, to validate the materials, and two, to validate the weights, because we want to oftentimes have that double checked to make sure that somebody didn't enter something incorrectly in the system. And so I'll give you an example of where we found one years ago. We have our answer panel systems, and someone mistakenly put in, instead of a fabric, a sheet metal of steel. And so the panels were exuberantly heavy when that isn't actually something that's orderable. So those are the types of catches that we want to make sure that we're looking through with the engineering department to make sure all of that data is accurate. So then collecting life cycle inventory data and starting to process that data for modeling. So then we go into our modeling phase. This is where we create the product profile and the improved life cycle model. We run the method required by the product category rule to obtain the results. And then starting to create that EPD draft, including that product description. So this is where we work a lot with product marketing for that upfront description and product pictures and those types of things. Engineering, and on our side with the bills of material for the product and packaging. And then we begin to move into the development of that EPD. So extracting those LCA results and metrics based on the product category rules, processing those results in an Excel format for the EPD template, then calculating recyclability and recycled content, complete the EPD, and then we're at a point where we can actually submit it for verification. Verification typically lasts around 2 weeks, and then we need to respond to any feedback or comments made. And if amendments need to be made, then we need to make those and resubmit for re-verification. Final approval of an EPD and then submittal to the program operator's site for publication usually takes around 3 to 5 days. So this is where I said we'd kind of get to this. Why is comparing EPDs discouraged? Well, there's a few different reasons. Obviously, product lifespan is built into a product category rule. And Steelcase prides itself on producing design aesthetic, but very durable products that are meant to have a long life cycle. Yet, if you were to purchase a similar, let's say, seating product that might be made in another company with cheaper materials and maybe its design isn't as durable, it doesn't matter because they're still being compared based on the product's lifespan that's already developed as part of that product category rule. So life cycle stages measured, not all companies use the same life cycle reporting methods. There's definitely different scopes and stages that are assessed. And then there's the software and data sets. So Steelcase is currently using Gabby software, but years ago we used SEMA Pro. So there are definitely different options out there for the life cycle assessment software, different data sets, and assumptions, of course, where you may be using secondary data versus primary data. This is all aspects that you could likely put two people side by side, and their ultimate LCA numbers are going to come out a bit differently based on those assumptions. And then lastly, that choice and representative product type. So what are you choosing? Worst case, highest sales volume, those type of things can definitely make some slight differences for those comparisons. So is there an example of how material choice lowers embodied carbon? As I mentioned, for Steelcase, our biggest impact is looking at our materials. That's where we have the greatest opportunity to make those huge reductions. So this is something that we're constantly looking at is, what does it take? What is that embodied carbon? So an example that I bring up and is probably simple in nature, but just to make the point of PVC and polypropylene doors. PVC, excuse me, my voice is a little bit dry, is, extensionally much more carbon intensive than a polypropylene door. And so right now, we continue as we evolve our products and as we develop new products, are constantly looking at choices, not only around material health, but also what is that embodied carbon, and making decisions on those trade-offs. So I want to touch briefly around the material transparency, because we do use a lot of similar data. So the nice thing is that we can benefit from the work that we're doing to create EPDs to also help us with the material transparency. And on the screen, I'm sure you're thinking, wow, that's a lot for the screen, but it really is an interesting map that we took the time to develop that really plays into what it looks like moving down the supply chain to actually collect material formulation data and all of the hangups or hiccups that we walk through along the way. So ultimately, part of our goal when we're designing a product and developing one is to get that material information defined and defined early, and to be able to use materials that we've already used before, because obtaining that formulation level data really does take some time and does run into some difficulties from time to time. So our goal is to obtain full material disclosure, but there are certain circumstances where a supplier just absolutely refuses to give us that information. So then we need to rely on a list-based disclosure. The unfortunate part about that is then it requires us, as those lists evolve and change, to go back more frequently with that supplier and have them evaluate whether anything has changed. So talking about transparency, I just wanted to share that product sustainability libraries exist, and Steelcase actually currently uses two, both Origin Build and Ecomedes. So if you haven't seen these before, the benefit of these is they're actually providing you accurate, dynamic, real-time data. Previously, if you were interested in getting the specifications of a product, we call them internally product environmental profiles. Those may get updated every 6 months, some maybe every year, as things change. But when it comes to these product libraries, we are constantly uploading the data. So any little twinge of a change in, say, recyclability or embodied carbon, those two are being uploaded to these libraries. So you're getting real-time dynamic information, and you're able to print a product environmental profile so you can have that data set. Just know that it's a stamp in time, and that going back to the library, if you were to look at the product again, there may be some shifts. But it does allow for our clients, our suppliers, others to access this information. Like, does the product have an EPD, and actually provides you access to it directly? Does the product have product certifications and accessing directly to those certificates? What is the recyclability, recycled content, etc.? So these libraries allow us to really provide that product transparency that so many of you are seeking. So why do we have two libraries? Well, one, Ecomedes is used a lot by the A&D community, but they are very North America centric. So they do not provide the capabilities to translate into other languages. So we have the exact same data in both of these libraries, but Origin allows our APAC and EMEA regions to actually be able to translate that data into other languages. We're hoping that Ecomedes will get there. but they're not there quite yet. And then I'll just touch really quickly on mortar. Mortar is a really cool application that is connected to the Ecomedes site. And think of it as kind of your Pinterest when it comes to office furniture. So you can look at various layouts of office furniture. And if there's a product that you look or you like in that particular layout, if it has a little green dot over it, you can click on it and it's immediately going to take you to the product data that's embedded in that Ecomedes library. So this is just getting you a real simple glimpse of what those documents look like and the level of information that's provided. Each one of these, both Origin and Ecomedes, have this print button here. That's what allows you to generate a PDF or a printed version if you need it of the product specifications, including all of those product certifications. You just have to make sure that in some of them, in Origin, you need to expand the little crosshairs to get to the actual information. So that's what I'm sharing to date. And then I think we can open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Tammy. That was fabulous. And I can say from our side of this process, you know, reading through EPDs, looking at, you know, material transparency documentation, it has always seemed like a lot of information needs to go into that process. You know, seeing what you shared today, it's very clear that that is correct. And I do want to just say thank you also for being willing to go through that process, because it's extremely helpful for us in the design world to be able to you know, see what's out there and what the documentation looks like, but B, just also know that there are manufacturers that we can maybe lean on a bit when we're trying to do better on a project.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I thank you, Tammy, and I'm just gonna hand this over quickly to Mandy and Chelsea, who are also practitioners in the materials and LCA space. I'm just gonna really quickly share their bios and then let them share some thoughts, and also let, you know, Tammy, Mandy, and Chelsea you know, kind of run through the questions and other items that we might want to talk about. So Mandy is a sustainability professional. She has a decade of experience in life cycle assessment practices. Her expertise is in developing technical data and tools that fuel innovative thinking and provide means to translate innovations to credible outcomes and stories. So Mandy has a Bachelor of Science degree in chemical engineering, a Master of Science and PhD degrees in environmental engineering. She started her career as a sustainability engineer at Kohler, later moved to a sustainability consultant position with Sephora, and currently she is the co-founder and LCA practice lead for TrueNorth Collective. And then Chelsea, who is one of my CLF Wisconsin Hub co-leads, is a sustainability professional who recently joined the nonprofit space to support manufacturers across the world, pushing for better products in the spaces where we live, learn, work, and play. With a background in mass timber and agriculture, Chelsea knows firsthand the growing pressures and demands placed on both suppliers and purchasers to comply with sustainability initiatives and requirements. And as the materials specialist at ILFI, she's the primary Declare Label certifier and the first point of contact for hundreds of manufacturers trying to decode that slide that Tammy shared, I think. The standards and expectations for the ever-changing requirements in the materials space. So Chelsea and Mandy, thank you for being willing to kind of facilitate the discussion now, and I'm going to open it up to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. I know from this presentation, I could probably just chat with Tammy for hours about questions that I have. But I know I want to start from the top because this has been asked a couple of times. And how long is the EPD process on average for you? What does that look like from engaging with your engineers all the way through to getting it verified third party?
Well, it's went through a couple of different practitioners within our company, to be honest. So really a lot of our practice started in Europe years and years ago, and that's where the decision was made to purchase SEMA Pro. And it's really evolved into practitioners across the regions being part of this, but the management of it being housed in North America. And so we are actually in the transition of and working on modeling and getting our process evaluated and assessed by our third-party assessor. And so I would say that previously it would take up to 6 months of all of that work. And now that we're getting the operation that it goes through assessed and knowing that we're making the right decisions through that process consistently, we're finding that we can cut that almost in half to be able to do that. The biggest, honestly, upfront piece of that, though, is that data collection and verification with engineering is just making sure that we have those correct weights, the correct materials, and that we've defined that particular, product in the way in which we're going to define it with the product category rule.
That's fantastic. It sounds to me like the momentum of once you've gone through this process and tightening up your operations to make it easier. I can also attest that if you're in the declare space, doing one label and then renewals each year, you're only doing it for an hour a year, and it's not as easy. So with repeated practice and exposure, it becomes more of a system, a lot less attainable, a lot less digestible, not as much time and cost involved. Mandy, would you say that's a similar experience with working for third-party verification and reviewing EPDs?
Yeah, definitely. I think generally, like as Tammy mentioned, when she was talking about the typical process that they go through, the EPD review and verification process can take between 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the quality of the work and the report and completeness of the work that's being submitted. But we are seeing a lot of movements around having systems verified rather than single declare label or EPD label, having the system that generate the EPDs verified in the first place, which is going to save time and probably over years is going to save a lot of operating costs for the companies too, to kind of go that route too. But that efficiency building practice is definitely trickling down into the review and verification piece. And I would add that we're seeing that from program operators' perspective, the concept of digital EPDs, having a very defined template for how EPDs should look like, and then feeding information from an Excel file into the template. So there are a lot of movements around making that EPD review piece more efficient and getting through that verification piece much faster, so companies don't think of it as a bottleneck, more of a very efficient process that they can probably expedite to like 1 week or 2 weeks if they have right processes in place.
Wow, that's incredible reduction in time and operating cost.
Mm-hmm.
I also wonder, Tammy, are you getting requests from design teams for different scopes of EPDs? Or maybe like scope 3, type 3. I know even at Declare, we have specific EPDs that we accept and some that we do not. So I'm wondering if you're hearing any additional pressures in that way.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, they're wanting the type 3. And I can tell you one of the most common requests, you wouldn't think so, but we do actually do research on our incoming requests from our customers. And the most common or the most biggest need that we get from our sales organization and customers is help with leads metals. And so they also have defined what they want to see from an EPD. So the type 3 is expected. And if it's not available, then the question is, what do you have available? So with Origin and Ecomedes, if we don't have an EPD, we've at least provided our embodied carbon and embodied energy, but that obviously isn't all of the phases of the life cycle. So, and we have to, back to the point of all of those different lines of code that we have to assess and why we have to make choices. We also have to prioritize products overall because we have over 400 products. And if I have the stool over here that's been ordered 100 times, yet I have these chairs that have been ordered millions of times, where do I want to put my priority?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. How do you feel about alignment practices in the industry, like the common material framework or digital product passports? This push for like a digital footprint and all encompassing. I know on the surface it sounds like a great movement for our industries, but it also sounds complicated.
Yeah, we were part of providing feedback for the common materials framework. It seems to be slow in adoption, if I'm being honest. We are looking, definitely we have the team engaged on the passport. You know, I think that all of it is a good thing to help inform our practice and what clients are asking for. But we all have to make choices on what we're delivering to our customers. And so, and we want to be proactive, and we've kind of placed our bets, so to speak, in what we want to do. So unless there's extreme pressure to do something differently, we want to be aware of it. We want it to inform our practice to better it. But we need the voice of the customer to be part of that decision making on where that goes.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Kind of going back to a question Jody dropped in the chat earlier on your materiality assessment. Are the items that are on your matrix, are those color coded based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals or AIA's buckets?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer to it, but what I was actually going to do is pull the assessment categories for you and plop it in the chat here so that you could at least see what those were.
Sure. Let's see. Mandy, do you have any questions about?
I think a question from Tammy is always thinking about like what years of experience of developing EPDs, like if you want to translate that to tips for manufacturers who want to start doing this with more products, what would be your like top 3 tips for manufacturers?
Well, I would say make sure that you're benchmarking leading organizations. I think that's really important. Don't reinvent the wheel. And that's part of that benchmarking. It just doesn't make sense to do that. Like, find a similar like organization and find an organization that's a leading organization that may not be as connected to your industry, because you're going to get different aspects from both of them, I think. And then the other is do your homework on what software is going to work best for your organization, cost-wise, functionality-wise. And part of that's just talking to other people too. And then practice, like just get started, draw that line in the sand and decide that you're going to do one, and then it'll kind of fall into place from there.
Yeah, those are definitely great points. And to your point about kind of seeing what is out there, not starting the wheel, and kind of utilizing what is out there, there is a lot of movement and a lot of work around harmonizing and standardizing EPDs. And one resource that I find useful is American Center for Life Cycle Assessment has an actual working group around product category rule and EPD development that are basically putting together a lot of useful resources for practitioners, translating ISO into like simpler language that could be easier to grasp in terms of, you know, EPD creation has a lot of inventory metrics in it, which is really hard to understand what those metrics are referring to. So that team has developed a guidance document explaining some of these concepts, but also other documents that kind of show a list of program operators, a list of available product category rules, a list, and then through a web page of each program operator, you can see a list of published EPDs and the libraries that Tammy mentioned. There is a lot of resources out there that could be really good as starting points for your organizations. Thanks, Tammy.
That's really good points. Also speaking towards the alignment, the eco alignment is one that a lot of the standard settings and nonprofits are working on, and to unifying language about how we talk about carbon. I can say that a lot of conversations in this standard setting nonprofit space is focusing on not reinventing the wheel. We can set the pathways, but there's this kind of spirit of radical collaboration that we're all moving in the same direction. We just need to speak the same languages. So I'm very encouraged to see how that is progressing in the space. Nothing moves fast, but excuse me, we hear you.
Yeah, and manufacturers appreciate that. I mean, to be able to have that common language and be able to make decisions based on that common language is really helpful, especially for those starting out. You know, Steelcase has been doing this for quite a while, and we're on a journey. You know, we're far from being even close to perfect, but there are those that are just starting this journey, and so having that common language is really critical.
I certainly agree. There's also an element of a paralysis of choice if you're looking to establish certifications. I'm biased, I would say choose Declare, but pick one that usually will inform your processes. And like you've mentioned, establishing an EPD is very quickly translatable into getting a Declare label, which is easily translatable to an HPD. So picking your path and being sure to express all of your frustrations. We understand it's not easy, but giving that feedback is important to push for change and to do program modifications and systems improvements. So if you have feedback, don't be afraid to ask questions and give it to us. We need that pushback to make sure the programs are growing in the right directions.
Tammy, another question that I had was, do you see movement or requests around EPD optimization, which is kind of like the newer trend in disclosure?
Yeah, we do. I don't necessarily see as many organizations or manufacturers getting there yet. It happens naturally as part of the LCA process. The whole point is to complete an LCA to inform future development. So I think that it is happening naturally. Is it being captured in order to be able to respond to that? There's some work to be done around that. So I was just having that conversation as it pertains to the lead option 2 piece of the EPD. And we have a couple lead experts on my team, and one in particular that's been on both sides of, advocating for clients to pursue it. And then from a manufacturer's perspective, still not a big aspect of the points that clients are going after at this point in time yet. I say yet.
Yeah. But to your point, that is that it seems like that could be the next generation of disclosures, because once the impacts are disclosed, then the intent is to improve that over time.
Correct. Yeah.
We talk about that second point a lot, kind of just daily trying to figure out, okay, can we get it on this project? Can we find it here? So excited to hear that others are thinking about it. So we're at time. I just want to say one more time, Tammy, Mike, Chelsea, Mandy, really appreciate the conversation today. This is so great to hear. I find it energizing to talk to you all and hear what's going on. So thank you so much for your time, Tammy, and everything you shared about Steelcase. And Mike and Chelsea and Mandy, thank you all for your expertise. Really appreciate it.
Well,
And
thank you.
appreciate everyone attending today as well. Thank you all for being here, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a wonderful day all. Appreciate
You
it.
too.